reading, not a question. He goes on and on and on. And nobody cares. Nobody's got time for that, you know?
That's kind of sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It is, but it's the truth. And there isn't anything anybody can do about it. So just, get over yourself.
Oh, but we have so much to be thankful for.
Isn't that the truth? You don't have to look very far, do you?
Mm-mm.
Counting
I
your
don't think so.
blessings. Counting your blessings, that's a good way to start the day.
Hey, everybody.
Practicing what you preach is a good thing too.
Geez, what did you do now, Kathy?
Oh, stop. I didn't know you were on there. I was talking about you.
Oh.
Again.
We're counting our blessings. That's what we're doing.
And we are all blessed in many ways.
Yeah.
Got to talk to Nancy last night, so we're all set. I guess you got a new listing coming up, Kathy?
Yeah, how did you know that?
Because Nancy called to say, Kathy told me to include you on this.
Oh, the photographer, Nancy. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just when you have to put my listings in, I figured it'd be easier for you to have it. Are you okay with that?
I'm fine with it.
I just thought maybe that'd be easier because I'm going to have help. I'm going to I need a special meeting with you if you have time later today.
Of course.
I've started my paperwork. That entry thing is everything's throwing me, and I don't have to tell you that, but
you're not alone, and that's part of what we want to talk about today is just some of the clarification because we're getting a lot of it's really interesting. Did I start? I think it is recording. I'm going to go ahead and pause the recording for a second. I'm going to start the recording. Okay, hey you guys, thanks for coming online today. Just as a point of reference, this is a discussion for Legends of Real Estate agents. If an agent outside of our brokerage happens upon this this video and views it, please remember that the discussions here are solely for the Legends of Real Estate. Please check with your own brokerage for their policies and procedures. And thanks very much. All right, so okay, let's see. All right. Then we had a little bit of feedback. Is anybody still hearing that? Okay.
I'm not hearing anything.
Like nothing, or are you hearing me?
No, I hear you. I don't hear any echo or anything.
All right. So I know Diane and Rhonda got in the middle of this, and I don't think it's a bad discussion because we're having there's all sorts of pieces. Let me start back with what I wanted to cover today. What I want to cover today is I need to review FF and GG with y'all, and how they incorporate into the contract and make sure we get questions answered about that. I was kind of sharing a little earlier that as of August 17th, I think we all had this heightened sense of awareness. So we were very aware of what we were doing when it came to the listings and when it came to our purchases, our buyers, and putting together documents for them. I think we had this heightened level of awareness. And over the holidays, and we come into the beginning of the year, things were a little slower. I think we sat back a little bit and maybe either forgot, or then all of a sudden we're regenerated or re-engaged with our business. And all of a sudden, some of the things flew out of our head that we may have been discussing. So I want to bring FF and GG back up. I want to talk about the contract for sale and purchase to make sure that we've got things there. We've got listings. I want to just do a general roundtable this time to talk about things that you're experiencing. And Bonnie Seeker was just sharing that she's experiencing where another brokerage was introduced to a seller via an elder care program, and the sellers signed the listing agreement on February 3rd, and then they wanted to work with, well, they didn't whether they acknowledge or not or understand that they signed the listing agreement is unclear because their daughters were involved and may have helped them or may have assisted in trying to get paperwork done in order to move things forward. They chose to contact Bonnie Seeker and say, hey, Bonnie, we want to work with you. Bonnie put a lot of energy and effort into preparing for the listing, and then executing the listing, and executed the listing on behalf of our brokerage, which she was to do on February 19th, put it into MLS on February 20th, and got a call from an agent at another brokerage saying, that's my listing. Well, when that agent sent over the listing agreement, the agent had not signed it until the 21st. So we had we were the first and the valid listing agreement. However, since that agent signed that listing agreement, the seller has now committed to 2 brokerages. So we're trying to maneuver through that, determine, who helped them, assisted them in signing the listing agreement. Well, that's not important. There's an element of interest there to see, if maybe the daughter said, oh, this is fine, please go ahead and sign this via DocuSign, and the sellers did, not acknowledging or understanding that that was a listing agreement they were signing. And then now the brokerage that signed, while the agent that had the sellers sign the first listing agreement on the 3rd never fully executed it. So the brokerage did not acknowledge the listing.
No waiver.
Until later, until the 21st, correct, thank you. They never, they haven't done anything to assist in the process of listing the property or prepare the property for listing. And the agent has been told by the sellers that they do not want to work with him, but his brokerage is telling him that he needs to push for the listing. So Bonnie is doing an excellent job of kind of counseling the sellers and making sure that they understand what all of the different pieces are. We have the listing out there. We are the primary listing. It is in MLS. So we have to be careful, because if someone comes along and wants to make an offer on the listing, we need to make sure that this gets resolved prior to any acceptance, because at that point the seller could be, if the other brokerage decides to, liable for two compensations. So I think our world is, we're seeing that people are anxious with listings and want to get listings and opportunities in our business, whether it's out of desperation or out of desire or out of process. So I think that that's kind of what we're experiencing right now, is a slightly more competitive market, despite the fact that we've had a little bit of a drop off. Kathy had said earlier, some people that she's spoken with all the changes, are about ready to step out, but we really only had about a 4% drop off. I think we'll see a larger drop off when it comes July and people have MLS dues that need to be paid.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about where you all are at, what you guys have got going on, what might be a challenge or opportunity that you have. I know Kathy's got a listing coming up and she's concerned about some of that. Diane's got a couple of transactions going on. Bonnie's got a couple of transactions going on. I know Rhonda's been engaged in quite a few things. So is Maggie. So tell me where you guys are at. Where's your mindset right now? What are some key questions that you want to make sure we get on the table? Because I'll move into FF and GG just for clarification, and then we can pull up the contract for sale and purchase and the listing agreement. Wherever it is that you all have the questions is what I really want to focus on today.
I do have a question. Are people,
Yeah.
I'm not getting any showings on 2 of my listings.
Right.
I think that they're priced right. I just think that the market is just kind of really dead right now. And I just wanted to see what other people are seeing.
I agree.
Okay, that makes me feel a little bit better.
And the only thing I'm going to add to that is I agree and disagree. it's really micro market. You really have to look at what's happening in the micro market for you, because we have 3 properties that went on the market in the Riverside Avondale area and are already under contract. And they were under contract I'm sorry, 2 in Avondale and 1 in Ponte Vedra that all went under contract within 3 days.
It's
Have
called
multiple
location,
showings.
location.
Well, I mean, I think Bonnie has a point that, it is part location, but I think it's also, I mean, I think knowing you, Diane, I'm sure that the property is priced well.
Well, it's
That's
also,
not the issue.
they're both condos and condos are half
It's
homes.
market area and
Okay, can I ask a question, Diane? Do you think maybe it's the condos and
You do.
townhouses that are just, we're over,
There's
this-
too many of them. They're overbuilt and the competition is horrendous.
I agree. I think that it's going to be harder because they are condos. The townhouse I listed before Christmas sold in the weekend because it had no HOA and no
Oh, wow.
CDD.
Okay.
I think that condos fees have gone up and that's deterring a lot of it. And there's a lot of unknown with condos.
And they're competing with the townhouses, don't you think?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, and there's just, and they keep building them, so the competition is horrendous. I think that's part of the problem with the condos and townhouses. I see that when I do my comp.
So I think you are both tagging on to something the condos are in a very competitive market. We have experienced a decline, and if you look at any of the statistics, either through Market Summary or through Domus Analytics, condos are down, condo pricing is down, time on the market is up. It has become a softer market. Number of listings are up. It's more greatly impacted by the rates and the fact that I think Diane's point of increases in condo dues or condo fees have also impacted the ability to sell condos. Nick has had a couple of condos that have actually gone under contract. Maggie has her hand up. She's been working on a condo in the Riverside area for a while. Go ahead, Maggie.
Yes, so I think what Bonnie shared about townhouses, like being good competition for condos, especially in Riverside with this, John Gorey 2525 College Street. There are single family homes with a 3rd bedroom and no HOA fees or CDD fees or anything that are priced, right now we're at 2.2. We started at 405. Now we're at 374. I saw that when the other 2.2 went on in building 2, Clark, they copied our pricing immediately. So I've seen more showings, but guys, when last time it takes a long time to sell condos, right? But it's been over 6 months, Clark. I think. I mean, it could be even more. I'm scared to look, right? But the seller is not too worried. He's just, like, okay, we have a backup plan. We've started to, do a soft launch on Facebook Marketplace with a rental listing to see if we'd get any hits for a number that he approved. We haven't. And so it's like, do we just wait until the seller's like, okay, well, let's just switch to finding a tenant? At what point, Clark, does that happen? I mean, or until the listing agreement is up for.
You're in the high 3s, Diane. What price points are the 2? I don't remember of condos.
One is at 485, but it's in Willaca and it has a boat slip and it's on the river there. So it's more of a retiree retreat type of second home for somebody. It can be marketed as rental income too, because you can rent it out for a week at a time for if someone wants to do Airbnb or something to that effect. The other one is listed, it's a 2.2 and it's listed at 220, but there's a lot of listings in that community. It's just a matter of me marketing it. It does have a sun porch that is different than all the others. So I'm doing an open house on Sunday. I'm trying to get some people in the two. I'm just gonna see what people say. If they think, I need to hear what they think about the condo and the price and the association.
I think that's a great idea, and I think it's wonderful that you're able to pinpoint something that you think is a differentiating factor in that property that you can use to market. And the one down in Malacca, I think it's a great opportunity to see if we can do some sort of marketing push related to second home buyers.
Right.
Or second,
It's going to be in Homes and Land because it's the TBC one, and it's going to be a lot of out of towners. So I'm hoping people pick it up and kind of see it as a good opportunity for a Florida home.
it's a great idea.
Tried to market it on different Facebook markets for boaters. I'm actually going to reach out to someone who I know does digital marketing, and I'm going to find out how to target boaters and retirees and, people up north.
Take a look at a couple of Facebook groups that's been successful for a couple of our agents, is to join a couple of Facebook groups geared to that. So like if you've got a Northeast boater group or something like that, or if you have local boater groups or local water groups, investment groups, the Facebook groups have been fairly popular for some additional marketing push on properties. So I think it may want to look into see what that might bring.
And I'm maybe doing an open house on that property the following weekend. So trying to see, even to market it to other, a lot of the owners there have more than one unit. So I gotta reach whoever is interested.
Knowing that is a huge piece of information. That's great. And you found that out through MMT?
No, actually I found out through the owners are very connected to, it's a small community, so they all know each other. And when they go down there, they all hang out together. It's more of a vacation spot for all of them. So they do talk a lot.
Oh, that's great. MMT may be able to give you the names and addresses of people that have more than one unit.
Yes,
so
I
that
thought
you can
about
target
doing a digital marketing, if I can get their email addresses and start that way, and then maybe move to paper. Because it is an older community. That's why I'm doing a lot of the print ads, like Homes and Land, because they're not on, on the computers as much. They are, but some of them aren't.
No, that's true. And there's the Real Mailer campaign programs that you can use straight through MLS also, if you want to do anything hard copy to them, to their actual addresses.
Thank you.
If you don't want to do, if you're not going to do targeted internet marketing or email marketing.
Perfect.
So you've got campaigns through that Real Mailer that you can do. It's right on your dash.
It's only been a week and a half. But even the second condo was this past weekend on Friday, and the owners were like, we didn't get any showings. I'm like, I know, I told you it slowed down a lot and that this one was going to be harder to sell than others. So.
Right. And with condos, I mean, even though the new guidelines are really for condos within 3 miles of the ocean, it's kind of an overflow to condos in general, and people are concerned about assessments. With that expressed a lot by people considering condos. I'm concerned about additional assessments. So, I mean, that's something to think of. But I think you're exactly right. The condo market is tight and is got a lot of competition. Like Maggie was saying, in the vicinity around a property that's a condo, you can get a single family home in a similar price point. And like Bonnie Seeger was saying, it's, competition from townhomes. So that's definite challenge. Does anybody have any ideas for Diane in addition to what she's already said that might you want to throw out?
I do. Diane, do you know any realtors who hang their license at EXP?
A couple. Why?
I was with EXP for 3 years before joining Legends, and the way that the brokerage is set up, like if you know or like any of those EXP agents here or your contacts, right? You
Mhm.
could just like ask that, like if there's a target, like an exact location that you want to target or that you want an agent to market your property to their people, I would say it doesn't hurt to, see if you could. I thought it was really helpful when I was an agent at some points. So it's just an idea.
Thank you. And then the John Gorey is a great condo. I love it. I've sold two in there or one, at least one. But I've shown it many times and it's a very cute niche and it does take a little bit longer to sell. So don't give up. You've got to find the right person. It's usually an attorney, a doctor, that wants to be close to downtown. So maybe you need to target, people who work in the downtown area or the hospitals.
Right.
Or St.
Thanks.
Vincent's.
Thank
This
you.
is
I
the part
needed
thought
that
about.
shot of hope. I needed that shot of hope. Thanks.
No, it's a great building. I love them both.
Yeah. St. Vincent's, I hadn't thought about that. Doctors who just need a place to hang their hat. Um, wonder if St. Vincent's has a program. I know they have an HR department. Okay, cool. Good point on that one. How about anything else? So we got, I did want to kind of go back a little bit. The last business meeting, I shared this little graph. I'm hoping you can kind of see about compensation. Can you guys see the graph at all? Somebody, anybody? Can you all see this?
Yes, I can see it.
Yes.
All right, thanks. Um, compensation is still a big discussion, and being able to work within the confines of how you're managing it. A compensation in our world now is completely separate. So what you're going to have to do, and also most likely you're going to have to help others understand, is everything happens within the world in which you're working. If I'm working with a buyer, anything related to compensation is with that buyer. If I'm working with a seller, anything related to compensation is with that seller. Now, the parties, the buyer and seller, can discuss concessions. In other words, money's being given from one party to the other. They can discuss concessions and compensation. In other words, is one party going to help the other party with concessions and or compensation? So money can flow, but the buyer and seller, are the ones that need to understand or acknowledge, and it has to be very transparent to them, how monies are flowing and what the monies are being used for. So if I'm working with a buyer and I don't put anything into my offer related to the buyer requesting the seller to pay compensation, I don't put a compensation agreement in there. When I submit my offer, I am telling the other side, remember, I'm telling the seller what the buyer is asking for. So if I'm telling the seller that the buyer is not asking for concessions, is not asking for compensation towards their buyer broker agreement, the buyer has explained to me that the agreement that we have, they will fulfill on their own. So do I always have to have a compensation agreement? No. Do I always have to write something into paragraph 20? No. Do I always have to have Form FF? No. So if the buyer is willing to take on the responsibility of their buyer broker agreement commitment with our brokerage, when I write the offer, I don't have to put any comments into paragraph 20. I don't have to have any additional forms, either FF or GG. Does that make sense? You guys are
Yes.
all on.
Yes, that makes sense.
Oh, okay,
Yes.
so if the buyer is telling me that they're going to cover the buyer broker compensation, I don't need any other forms. So now I'm working with a buyer, and the buyer says, I want to go ahead, and I've already got an agreement with you, but when I look at my costs, my closing costs, which can include the compensation that I'm going to have to pay you as a buyer, the other closing costs related to my loan, the down payment that I have to make in order to get the loan. Sorry, somebody came in with a toy. Anyway, if they're saying I'm looking at this cost and I really need help with that, the question then becomes, well, do you want help with all of it or a chunk of it? So if your closing costs, in other words, down payment and closing costs, which can include the compensation, are $30,000, and you feel like you want help with $15,000, that's fine. We can ask the seller for concessions of $15,000. Now, if the buyer says, yes, I want to ask for the seller to help me with $15,000 of my closing costs, and you write into paragraph 20, buyer requests seller to pay $15,000 in concessions, right? You can put that into paragraph 20. Do you need any additional forms? No, you don't need any additional forms as long as the $15,000 is not going to be used to pay compensation. If that $15,000 is going towards everything but compensation, down payment, closing costs related to the loan, closing costs related to the closing, any additional fees, those things, if you ask for concessions and there's no monies of the concessions being used towards the buyer broker agreement, then you don't need any other forms. Does that make sense? Because the buyer is asking the seller for just a chunk of change. I'm going to mute myself for a second. Excuse me, Ryan. Sorry about that. Somebody else wants your attention. So does that make sense to everybody? Either put your faces on or shake your heads or give me a thumbs up or something.
Yes, that makes sense.
Okay, so now the buyer is saying, I want that $15,000. I may use some of that money for my buyer broker agreement to satisfy my buyer broker agreement. Once we understand that some of those monies may be used for the buyer broker agreement, we do need Form FF. And we need Form FF because Form FF says, look, whatever monies you're giving, I, the buyer, am letting you know that I may use some or all of it to my buyer broker agreement. So you would need Form FF. and then you would need the compensation agreement. Compensation agreement is outside of the transaction of the contract between the buyer and the seller. So it's the form that is used for the seller's broker to buyer's broker or seller to buyer's broker. We focus on seller to buyer broker. So let's take a look, just as a reminder, what oops, oh, that's not where it would be. Over to the, there we go. So just as a reminder and a refresher, this is FF, and it's strange because it's called credit related to buyer broker compensation. But what it does is say that here's the seller, here's the buyer, here's the property. They all acknowledge it. And what it's telling us is that the buyer has entered into a separate brokerage agreement. That's the buyer broker agreement. In other words, either the exclusive buyer broker agreement, the showing agreement, or the property pre-touring agreement. Let's focus on the two most, the two strongest ones, the exclusive and the showing. And it's not incorporated herein. Why? Because that's a contract between the buyer and their brokerage. The listing brokerage has no need nor intent with it and should never be requesting it, nor should we ever be giving it to them. Where we have that problem, where we have a problem with that is, of course, new construction on sellers. At closing, the seller agrees to credit the buyer the sums described below, which, for disclosure purposes only, the parties agree is related to the buyer's obligation under the buyer broker agreement to pay all or a portion of the buyer's broker compensation. All or a portion. So if the buyer is saying, I want to use some of those $15,000 to cover my buyer broker agreement, we need FF, because that's what puts the buyer and seller on the same page. Because remember, the request in paragraph 20, way down here,
Line 588.
way down here, we said that the buyer requests the seller to pay, in this case, we said buyer requests seller to pay concessions of $15,000. We didn't say anything about that. We could have also said buyer requests seller to pay buyer brokerage of 2% or 3% or 1%. And if the buyer broker agreement was different, then the buyer is taking on those responsibilities. So it's kind of like accounting. We just have to figure out where the money is and make sure everybody knows and everybody agrees that the monies that are being exchanged, how they're being used. So if I'm a buyer asking you, the seller, to give me money, I just have to make sure you know how it's being used. If I'm only using it for my down payment, rate buy down, closing costs associated with the loan, title attorney, I just can ask for concessions. The minute that I say that some of those monies are going to be used for my buyer broker compensation agreement, I have to disclose that to you either by being specific. In other words, I could say, buyer requests seller to pay $10,000 in concessions, and buyer requests seller to pay 2% to buyer broker agreement. I could do that right here, and then I wouldn't have to have FF. That's the frickin' form. Most important thing is that there's disclosure and transparency between the parties, the buyer and seller, to this contract. Then we have to figure out how to make sure that we get paid. While the agreement is here, there's no agreement between the party that's going to be paid, which is the brokerage, and the seller. So we would have to have a seller to buyer's broker agreement. Bonnie, you just popped on. Did you have a comment?
Yes. I put it in the chat.
Okay. You see the chat right now. Let's see. So in the chat, you said, see, you said, if I ask for concessions and compensation in the amount of $15,000, I need FF, but also GG. Okay, we haven't even started talking about GG yet. But if you ask for concessions and compensation as part of the 15,000, so if I say buyer requests seller to pay $15,000 in concessions,
And compensation.
then hold on one second. You can't just say and compensation. You have to be
Okay,
specific.
that was my question. Okay, all right. Okay,
So,
you have to do
if it's
differently.
concessions, they have to know. Now, if I said $10,000 in concessions and $5,000 in compensation, that's
Okay.
sufficient. If I said buyer requests $15,000 in concessions and 2% towards buyer's broker,
Okay,
or 2% of purchase price to buyer's broker, or 2% of purchase price to the Legends of Real Estate, then that would be sufficient. But everything has to be clear and concise
separate.
and transparent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so to just say you want $15,000 in concessions and compensation is not specific enough.
Okay,
It's the whole element of transparency, the decoupling. But notice here, if we put all of that into paragraph 20, we don't need FF. So that frickin' form you may not need. See what I'm saying? If we focus on the contract between the two parties and lay it out pretty specifically in additional terms, you may not need FF. You may not have to do FF too.
back up. I lost that one. Why would you not need the F and F if you're still asking for compensation?
If you're specific in paragraph 20, so for example, in paragraph 20, this is not a amendable one. Let me see.
Line 588,
Let me,
right? Okay.
Well, additional terms and conditions, paragraph 20. So if I were to add text here, if I were to say, buyer requests seller to pay $15,000 in concessions and
Okay.
2 and 3% to buyer broker, the Legends of Real Estate. I'm being clear and specific. I'm saying that the buyer is requesting the seller to pay $15,000 in concessions, which can be used towards rate buy down, anything in paragraph 9 of the contract for sale and purchase, anything related to the closing, the loan, that kind of thing, and 3% buyer's broker. 3%. This really should be 3% of purchase price to buyer's broker, the Legends of Real Estate. Then I've identified and I'm transparent. I'm saying I want $15,000 in concessions and 3% to my buyer's broker.
You still need to have that now, right?
So now I've got it all into paragraph 20. I don't have to have FF. If the buyer and the seller agree to that, the seller is acknowledging what the buyer's request is, and the seller is taking the responsibility. But what form would we need in addition to this?
GG. GG.
Which form?
GG. Oh, the compensation agreement,
Potentially.
right? Okay.
We would need the compensation agreement, which then relates back to GG. So we would need a compensation agreement that says that the seller and the brokerage have an agreement, either through the seller's broker or the seller directly. So we would need the compensation. We would need the compensation agreement. So now here's the other challenge then. I'm working with the buyer. This is what the buyer is asking of the seller, right? The listing agent has not provided me with a compensation agreement, right? So I'm going to add the compensation agreement to my offer package. And I'm going to add GG. Because what GG is GG says this contract, so GG places a contingency on the contract that the buyer and seller will execute, or that a brokerage agreement or an agreement between the seller or the seller's broker and the buyer's broker will be executed within a certain number of days, 3 days if left blank, so that the buyer understands what their liability is and the lender understands what the buyer's liability is based on what the buyer has agreed to pay the buyer's brokerage. So when you submit your offer package and you've not received a compensation agreement from the listing side, you'll need to go ahead and submit GG along with the compensation agreement, because GG is the agreement between the buyer and the seller to execute a compensation agreement, that the seller will execute a compensation agreement either through their brokerage or directly within a certain number of days. So the buyer knows their liability. Why does the buyer want to make sure they know their liability? Yeah. Anybody want to take a step?
Because informed buyers make more referrals in the future. I have no idea,
Okay.
Clark.
I think it's no, I think that, but you're tagging on to a point of, if I'm the source for my customer, they're going to have a better experience and they're probably going to refer me to more people. So that's kind of why we're talking about this. If we understand why it's there, we can explain it to the buyer, and the buyer will feel more confident and comfortable in the transaction and more confident and comfortable with us. The reason that you want to ensure that the buyer knows their liability based on their buyer brokerage agreement or the seller's willingness or unwillingness to assist in compensation is because it can impact the buyer's ability to qualify. For example, if the buyer has made application with a lender and the lender says you have exactly what we need to get you into the property, you have exactly the down payment, exactly what you're going to need in your closing costs, and now they've executed a compensation agreement at 3%, but the seller is only willing to pay 1%, which means the buyer is liable for 2%. That 2% could throw them off of their ratios and their ability to purchase that property. So the lender has to know and the buyer has to know what the liability the buyer has taken on based on the fact that you've negotiated with them. You've negotiated with them to take on a certain amount or to pay a certain amount to you for your services. Okay with that? And what I'm seeing a lot of is in this contract for sale and purchase, I'm seeing a lot of people automatically check GG. Or let's just focus on GG. They're checking GG. And when they make the offer, they check GG. they submitted, the listing agent submitted a compensation agreement. So when they send it back, it's now an executed compensation agreement, but they've been told they have to always have GG. So they send it with the, or excuse me, they send the compensation agreement, but they don't send GG. Or they send GG, but then because the compensation agreement was executed, they don't execute GG. Most of our title companies, if it's here, they're going to need to see it. So if GG is checked and you don't have an executed agreement, you're probably going to see a note from me that says, you've checked GG, I don't see an executed addendum GG in your file. Do you have one? No, I don't have one. We submitted that, but we already executed the compensation agreement, so we decided we didn't have to worry about GG. Well, then you either have to remove it from the contract or you have to execute it. Those are your choices. And this is where we're getting some confusion is which form, remember, compensation agreement, which is referenced in GG, is for a contingency on the contract if we haven't executed one. Here's and the history on this is GG was created because agents were refusing to present offers until a compensation agreement was executed. You can't do that. The compensation agreement is an agreement between a party with a party that is not a party to the contract. So you can't delay the presentation of an offer to a seller because a compensation agreement has not been executed. Because you're delaying it for a party that's not in the contract. So that's how come GG was created. It was to avoid agents delaying the presentation of an offer, because if you get into a multiple offer situation and they presented one that had GG and didn't present one because, or presented one because it had a compensation agreement, but didn't present another because it didn't, they would be in violation because both offers were to be presented. The compensation agreement or the willingness to execute compensation agreement occurs outside of the negotiations between the buyer and the seller. So FF and GG are initiated on the buy side. You can avoid GG if you're the listing agent and share a compensation agreement with a potential agent or with an agent who has a potential offer for you. Please do not ever put GG into MLS or a compensation agreement that's been executed by a seller. With FF, we just need to know what your buyer's intentions are. Did we thoroughly, were we thoroughly transparent when we made our statement in paragraph 20, or do we need to make sure the seller understands how the monies that they're going to provide are being used? How about some questions?
Clark, I have a question.
Yeah.
If you write an offer and you put in paragraph 9 under seller's obligations to pay on other, you put buyer's brokerage of X amount, okay? Then you go to paragraph 20 and you put seller to pay 10,000 in buyer's concessions, okay? Then all you need is FF, is that correct?
No, if you've written here, buyer requests seller to pay 2 of purchase price to buyers.
Brokerage, yeah,
Broker.
yeah,
You can put that in here
yeah.
and then add concessions in paragraph 20, and then you wouldn't need FF.
Why would you not need FF?
Because you've identified that there's buyers requesting 2% of the purchase price towards the buyer's broker, or excuse me, to be paid to the buyer's broker. And in paragraph 20, you've stated that they all would like $15,000 or $10,000 in concessions or whatever number you used. So
But do I need
you've
a
been
compensation? I'm sorry, go ahead. Do I need
so
a
you've been
compensation
completely
agreement?
transparent. Yes.
Okay. So I
You would
don't need
still need a
FF or
compensation.
GG if you use 9.
If you use 9 and 20, you wouldn't need FF, but you would need GG if a compensation agreement hasn't been executed.
Clark,
If you're submitting the offer. But now I'm confusing you. Is that
Yeah,
what you said, Bonnie?
yeah.
One second.
Because we just did the opposite of that on another contract.
No, we didn't. No, we didn't. One second, Yasmin. What we said is that if you put these two in there, you don't need FF. If a compensation agreement was provided by the listing agent and when you made your offer, you executed it, then you don't need GG because GG places a contingency on the contract to ensure that a compensation agreement gets executed.
Right.
So if I put into paragraph 9, but I don't think there's enough space in paragraph 9 other to truly execute the true verbiage. But if you put into paragraph 9, seller to pay 2% to buyer's broker, and then you put into paragraph 20 that the buyer is requesting concessions, you don't need FF, but you would still need GG until a compensation agreement is executed or in order to ensure that a compensation agreement gets executed. Okay, Yasmin, you had a comment?
yes. So, in other words, if we put in the paragraph 20, and we are very clear saying that the buyer is requesting 3% for compensation. We are very clear there. We just need the compensation agreement. No FF, no GG, no nothing else. Because we are putting very clear there what we are going to do with that money, right?
No.
Oh, no.
Yes, you are being very clear that the buyer is requesting money for compensation, and you need to make sure it's very clear, 3% to the buyer's broker in compensation, to the legends of real estate. I mean, it needs to be more clear than what you stated, but yes. And then a certain amount of money towards concessions. If both of those are in paragraph 20, you don't need FF, but you still need a compensation agreement. And if the compensation agreement has not been executed when you submit your offer, you're going to want to include GG because GG puts a contingency on the contract so that it will be a compensation agreement will be executed. The compensation agreement is something that allows us to get paid.
Okay.
See, even putting Yasmin, even putting the statements that you said into paragraph 20, that's an agreement between the buyer and the seller. There's still no agreement between the seller or the seller's broker and our brokerage if you're working with the buyer.
Yes.
So when there's no executed compensation agreement at the time you write the offer, then yes, you would want to make sure there's GG to ensure that one gets executed within a certain period of time.
So we are using GG because there was no compensation offered on the property upfront. Am I correct?
No.
Oh, okay.
If there was no compensation being offered on the property, or even if there was compensation being offered on the property, to ensure that the brokerage gets paid, you need to have a compensation agreement unless the buyer is going to go ahead and pay directly from the buyer broker agreement.
Okay.
So
right.
if a seller tells me, if a listing agent or the seller tell me I'm not offering any compensation to a buyer's broker, then there would be no reason to do GG because there's no monies coming from the seller or the seller's brokerage to the buyer's brokerage. So there would be no reason to do GG. If the seller says I'm offering 1%, then you want to make sure that it gets executed in a compensation agreement. So you would add GG to ensure that a compensation agreement is executed so that the buyer can use that to determine if they're still able to qualify through their lender, because the lender would then know that of the 3% that they have agreed to pay you, 1% is coming from the seller and 2% is coming from the buyer. Can the buyer still qualify for the loan if they're getting the loan? If it's cash, then it changes.
So Clark, is that a conversation that we should be having with our buyers and or their lenders in the beginning, like in the pre-qualifying process?
I'm sorry, what conversation?
Like, okay, so how much extra money do you have set aside for this
What?
purchase?
I'm sorry, you're breaking up. I didn't hear what you said.
That's okay. I'll ask you offline.
Am I breaking up or is it just me that I'm hearing? You can
You're
type in the
fine.
chat. If to Maggie's point, I think that when you're sitting with your buyer talking, you have to have an understanding of what the commitment is that they're making. You have to make them aware of how that compensation can be paid, either 100% by them. They can ask for compensation or they can ask for assistance from the seller. So I think that is a good discussion to have with them. I think when they're making application or when they're talking to a lender, I don't think it's a bad thing to ensure the lender is aware of what their commitment has been. The lender can probably tell you what would be the maximum that they could absorb and still be okay to purchase. Maybe at a certain price point. So how are we doing? I don't see anything in
Okay.
chat.
It is like, it is kind sometimes when we're talking, I understand. And then after you say another phrase, it's like, oh no, I don't understand now. The GG, the FF
I
is
don't think
easier to understand, but GG is kind of, I am not sure exactly when I need to use it. So, but FF is very easy, I guess.
so. You only need to use GG when you don't have an executed compensation agreement. You have a buyer that is
Excuse me.
has signed a buyer broker agreement, and in order to ensure that they're aware of what their obligations are, you need to ensure that you have an executed compensation agreement. So GG is only needed when a buyer is asking for assistance from a seller related to compensation, and you don't have an executed compensation agreement yet.
Okay.
Rhonda,
Okay, so
Kathy,
when you write-
Diane. Go ahead, Bonnie.
When you write the offer and you ask for compensation and concessions in paragraph 20 on line 588, then that means, okay, then you're going to attach an FF with that? It's a question, Clark.
Mhm. If you put into paragraph 20 and you're very specific that this amount of money is for concessions and this amount of money is for compensation,
Right.
you would not need F.
So all you're
Let's
gonna
look
need
back
from
at
there, okay. You don't need FF. Is that what you said?
if you're very specific about what if you put into paragraph 20, the buyer is requesting 3% towards the buyer's broker, Legends of Real Estate, 3% of the purchase price towards buyer's broker, the Legends of Real Estate, and buyer is requesting $10,000 in concessions,
Okay,
then you don't need FF. You could have used FF and used this third option here for 3% and $10,000. Put 3% here and $10,000 here.
now where is here? Help me,
Isn't FF on your screen? Is FF
Oh,
on
okay,
your
okay,
screen?
okay. Okay, but that, again, that's FF. You just told me we don't need FF.
What I said was, if you put those two statements very specifically in paragraph 20, you
Right,
don't need FF. Your option would have been to use FF to explain that,
okay,
because FF allows you to ask for a specific percentage. For example, if the buyer is only requesting assistance with their buyer broker agreement commitment, or you could have asked for a flat amount, like $30,000, and then the seller knows that some of it's going to be used to pay the buyer broker compensation, or I could have
Okay.
asked for a percent and an amount. Go ahead, Diane.
okay, okay.
Diane, go ahead.
This might help. What I do is I use FF because a lot of times when I'm putting in an offer, the sellers will agree to the initial amount, but then want to change just the commission that they're offering. So you don't have to rewrite the whole contract at that point, and you just have to modify FF, and it makes my life easier, because then you don't have to go back and forth changing the whole, purchase and sale agreement or the sale and purchase agreement. So that's one reason I use FF versus then writing that commission into the contract.
And
Or-
then do you put the the concessions in paragraph 20?
No, because then you would have to edit paragraph 20 and have it initialed or rewrite it. So one good thing of using FF only is that you won't have to rewrite the whole entire agreement.
Oh, that's a good point. Okay,
So, I mean, it's just different ways of doing things, but they're all the same.
okay. Okay, so you're putting the compensation and concessions in FF, is that what you're doing?
What I think Diane blanked out a little bit, but what I think she was saying is that you have a couple of different options.
You're breaking up, Clark. I think we lost Clark.
What Diane was saying is, no, I'm right here. Can
Okay,
you hear me?
yes,
What Diane is saying is that she uses FF and puts both compensations and concession into FF, either as a flat amount, as a
Okay.
combination, or specifically in as a percentage based on compensation.
Okay.
And then he doesn't have to worry about amending the contract itself. They amend FF, which is already referenced in the contract. So they make their changes to FF. So she manages both compensation and concessions within FF.
I
As
like
the only
that. That's
document
good.
that needs to.
Good point, Diane. That's very good. I like that.
Thought it would help.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And
Now,
that is one option. The other, you can put stuff into paragraph 20. Sometimes people like to use paragraph 20 rather than add additional forms, which is fine, as long as you know when you amend it, you're amending or using the addendum to contract, which is the Florida Realtor form addendum to contract. Go ahead, Bonnie.
if we're using FF, then we still have to have a compensation agreement, correct?
If the buyer is requesting any monies from the seller to be paid
Right.
to the buyer's brokerage, then yes, it has to be a compensation agreement.
Okay. Okay. But then we don't have to use GG in this case,
However-
am I right? Correct?
Well, you would have to use GG if there was not an executed compensation agreement.
Oh, okay. 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 Okay.
If you're making the offer and you don't have a compensation agreement from the listing agent,
Okay.
and you're sending it over, then you would want to include GG to create that contingency to ensure that a compensation agreement would be executed.
Okay, so when you make the offer, you're going to include both FF and GG then.
You would include FF and GG if you did not receive
Right. Okay.
a compensation agreement from this is why we put the compensation agreements into the listing packages also, so that you can send anybody who is considering making an offer the compensation agreement, so you don't have to add another contingency onto the contract, which is GG. GG adds a contingency to the contract.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Go ahead, Diane.
Okay, so pretty much a compensation agreement needs to be always included in some form, either if you're writing it in paragraph 20 or in FF, because if your buyers are asking the sellers to pay the buyer
The
the
compensation.
compensation, then it has to be included. So that's just one point that will always need to be if your buyers are looking for help with paying our compensation.
I may have misheard you. The compensation agreement should never be referenced in the contract and for sale and purchase.
No, but it should be included when you submit the offer. So if they agree, they could just sign, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay.
But remember, if it hasn't been fully executed when you submit a compensation agreement, you should use GG.
Correct.
So that the contingency just exists to protect the buyer. If the listing agent sent you one and now you executed it, or it was executed with the offer that was submitted, then you don't need GG.
How many times are other agents seeing that is given to you? Because I'm not seeing that. They may verbally say it, but they don't send it to you signed.
They don't
Agreed.
send it at the compensation agreement.
Mm-mm.
No,
I haven't seen
after
one
they
yet
see the
either.
offer.
Oh. Mm-mm.
I'm sorry, Diane, what were you saying?
Mm-mm.
I haven't seen one been given before an offer has been made.
Mm-mm.
So right after August 17th, everybody was calling the listing agents asking, what's the compensation? Can you send me a compensation agreement? That dwindled fast because what came through with the message that came through legally was you shouldn't be asking. You have a compensation agreement, a buyer broker agreement with your buyer. There's no reason to ask what the seller's offering. When you make your offer, submit a compensation agreement and the request for compensation, and the seller will negotiate based on what they feel is fair. So we've seen a dwindling of people, of agents asking before showing the property, although
Right.
only to about 45%. The challenge is, here's where I'm seeing challenges. We're getting a lot of offers where agents are checking automatically GG, but not including it. They've been told always check GG, and they're checking it and not including GG. They're including the compensation agreement, but they're not including GG. So the compensation agreement gets executed, but we don't have a fully executed GG addendum, which has now been written into the contract, and we have to resolve that form. We have to say, well, it was in here as part of the process, and now you're telling me it's not. Why is it not? Where is it? Becomes the question. So you have to figure out what you're going to do about GG if it hasn't been included.
Okay.
I mean, whether you amend the FF or you amend the contract, we just need to make sure all pieces are there.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't have all pieces, we get rid of them by everybody agreeing to get rid of them. Now, I will say we did have one recently where the agent said that they were asking the seller for a percentage. I think it was 3% of the purchase price. And because this says that the seller acknowledges that all or a portion may be used towards the buyer's broker compensation, they did not include a compensation agreement because the buyer had chosen to pay the compensation themselves and may use a portion of what was requested for concessions, or may use a portion of what was requested to pay their buyer broker compensation or pay monies towards their buyer broker compensation, but hadn't decided, so they didn't include a compensation agreement, which is fine. If there's no compensation agreement, that means the buyer is taking on the responsibility of whatever the buyer brokerage agreement says. And by including FF, the buyer now has the opportunity to use a portion of the funds that the seller is committed to towards their buyer broker agreement, or they can say no. So if there's no compensation agreement, the buyer is the one who's committed based on the buyer broker agreement. There's no compensation agreement from the seller or seller's broker. The buyer is taking on the responsibility of paying their compensation. And if you're on the listing side, it's not your responsibility to tell the buy side how to do their job. So if you receive an offer, I mean, that wasn't, I mean, it wasn't meant to be crass. I mean, if you can't interpret, can you ask questions? Of course you can ask questions. You can ask for clarification, but it's not your job to counter with, you know, a compensation agreement if they didn't include one. We don't know what the agreement was. It's not a bad thing to clarify. You know, I don't see a compensation agreement. Is your buyer, you know, is your buyer taking care of that? Are you not asking for assistance? Or especially if they asked what the seller was willing to do. But if I'm a buyer and I send you an offer and no compensation agreement, that's telling you that the buyer is managing their compensation that they've committed to on their own. If I attach FF, then that's telling you as the listing agent that the buyer may use some of the monies towards their buyer broker agreement, but that they're still taking on the responsibility of their buyer broker agreement, and the seller's not responsible for paying anything. So on the closing disclosure, there would be a credit for 3% from the seller to the buyer. And then on the buy side would be a debit showing compensation to the buyer brokerage.
Question, Clark?
Yeah.
Okay, I had that investment property up for sale, and I had got over 20 something offers on that, okay? I kid you not, I had to literally, when the seller was considering the offers, I had to literally get on the phone with those agents and say, may I assume that your buyer is covering your compensation? And do you know that they absolutely go, no, the seller's not doing that? That's exactly what I heard. I heard that, I can't tell you how many times. So my question is it, as a listing agent, is it our responsibility to pick up the phone and call him and just confirm that he knows that he hasn't done something correctly on his side? I mean, because what will happen when we get ready to go to closing and there's no commission for him?
But that's not our responsibility. He had to sign a buyer broker agreement in order to be able to show or write an offer on the property. So that's not our responsibility.
They don't even know
So I
what
think
that
it's
is.
great.
I'm sorry.
I can't help that.
I know.
I can't help that if they're not aware that they had to have a buyer broker agreement. I can't help that. What I can say is that if you had 23 offers and you went through and called each one that didn't provide you with either something to indicate that the buyer was asking for assistance with their buyer broker compensation, either FF that indicates that some of the monies that would be provided by the seller would go to buyer broker agreement. There wasn't a statement in the offer that indicated that monies were being requested to be used towards the buyer's broker agreement. If there was no GG saying that we want to make this contingent until we get a compensation agreement executed. If there was nothing, no reference to compensation coming from the seller to the buyer's broker, then that individual is taking responsibility. That realtor is taking responsibility to connect with the buyer to get their compensation.
Right.
And if it got to closing and the selling agent said, well, where's my compensation from the seller? Well, none was asked for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That is going to happen
Therefore,
too.
none. Oh, I'm sure it is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sure. So, I know this is confusing because it talks about the credit related to the buyer's broker agreement, and then the title of GG is also a little bit confusing. Seller's agreement with respect to buyer's broker compensation. We've had a couple of agents say, well, once this is signed, we don't need the compensation agreement, right? No, this is the contingency on the contract that one will be executed, either a seller's to buyer's broker or seller's broker to buyer's broker or seller to buyer's broker will be executed. This creates a contingency. It doesn't indicate that one has been executed. Okay. How are we feeling? Everyone has gone to sleep on me. Okay.
No, I'm feeling good with FF, and I'm still dealing with the GG. But the thing that I understand is that it's better. I don't know if I am wrong with this, but is better always when we write down an offer and we send the offer with the GG, right? Because it's not a executive contract, right? So I guess that always is better to send a GG with the offer. If we are
you don't
asking,
have an
if we are
executed,
asking, excuse me, if we are asking for the compensation to the seller, right? From the seller.
If the buyer is asking for assistance to compensate a buyer's broker and a compensation agreement hasn't been executed, then it would be good to include GG
Yeah.
if the buyer is not intending on paying the compensation themselves or through monies they receive that are identified in FF.
Yes.
But to your point, if every time you write an offer, you check off the box GG, then you need to go ahead and make sure that that addendum is in your offer package. And you need to make sure that it gets executed or that it gets removed from the contract if the seller executes the compensation agreement and then chooses not to execute GG. Then GG
Yeah.
has to be removed from the contract. Otherwise, it's just hanging out there. Okay. So in the contract, just some things to make sure that you're watching for. I'm seeing a lot of people missing the homework. If you notice, the home warranty does not have an automatic default. It was earlier than this. There's no default on, oh, here we go. So the home warranty in, I think it's 8E, 9E, the home warranty. People are leaving this blank thinking that there's a default. There's no default in the home warranty. At closing, the buyer or the seller, or it's not applicable, shall pay. So if a home warranty is not being negotiated or is not being a part of the transaction, then make sure that you click on NA. Anything else in the contract for sale and purchase that you guys have run into that's a challenge for you? Anything on the listing side that you want? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I say that
You're fine.
because my experience, we need to make sure that all the dates and the dates match, because sometimes we put many days for the loan approval and it's out of the of the after the closing day. So we need to make sure that we count the dates very well.
Yeah, that's a great point. We have seen this a few times recently where the date that you want to have acceptance by and the date for closing, when you include the number of days for loan approval, because we were running into a short month in February, people were thinking 30 days and trying to set a closing date that actually occurred, excuse me, before the end date for loan approval. So to Yasmin's point, I think it's important that you're counting the days, making sure that you're clear on what the days are. And it does count. So if we accept today, then tomorrow is day one. Every single day counts, even holidays count. It's if the time frame ends on a Saturday, Sunday, or federal holiday, then it moves to the next non-Saturday, Sunday, or federal holiday. And you can use on or before in here under the the closing. So you have a closing date that you'd like to target, but it's okay to close a little bit before if things come together. Then you can say on or before on that paragraph, or excuse me, that line. Anything else on the contract for sale and purchase, or does anybody have a question on the listing agreement? Okay. Anybody have anything that they want to bring up? I feel like I've either overwhelmed you or not sure. Rhonda, you okay?
Yes, I'm fine, just taking lots of notes.
And then Kathy, I know you have a listing. I know you have a listing coming up. Kathy, how you feel?
I'm okay. I've got some questions, but I'm not, but we'll talk about them when I talk to you later. I'm okay.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Diane, I know you got good input, so you all right? You think you're doing okay?
All good.
Okay. You, Bonnie? I know
Yes,
you're
sir.
gonna have a hard conversation this afternoon. So
Yeah.
Uh,
Would you prefer I call this evening or tomorrow morning?
you can call this evening.
Okay.
I've got an appointment at 4:30, so I might be out of pocket from about 4 till about 6:30, but
That's fine, because that's when the appointment is, so that's fine. Yep. Okay,
Clark,
that's fine.
is there any way to get a copy of this that you've got all these highlights and information on? I like this.
yeah.
Well, that,
How about
this
the
was
chart?
huh?
How about the chart at the very beginning? Can you make us a copy of that and email that to us, sir?
I took
The
a
one that
picture of
Patty
that.
Are
had.
you talking
I
about
took that
this
up with a
one?
picture of that.
This one?
The one you had at the beginning that
Okay,
showed
so
with
I've got
the arrows
The
for FF and
compensation.
GG.
The puzzle pieces, yeah. I
Yeah.
took a picture of that.
Uh.
But I love the way that contract's marked up.
okay.
Yeah, both of those would be helpful for all of us, yes. Or us, me anyway.
And, okay, I think I got everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Bonnie Brady cut off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. All right. Yeah, I can do that. No problem.
Thank you, sir.
I would like to go
there's nothing else
to that. I'd like to go review that listing class you had that I missed. And it's on a YouTube channel, but I don't know how to get to it.
You don't know how to get to the YouTube channel?
No, I don't. I've never done it.
Okay.
It was a
So,
class like this, but it was on
okay.
listings.
Right.
All right.
So you can go directly to youtube.com.
All right.
You
Yep.
can go to youtube.com.
Yep.
And then you're going to want to go to our channel on or youtube.com. You can go directly to our channel. I don't remember the number, but let's get it for you. I'm going to load.
I'm assuming all of these little Tuesday morning classes you put on YouTube.
Yeah, I've missed a couple that I need to upload, but yes.
Good. Okay.
And then if you go on and you're not sure where to go, you can search for Connecting the Legends.
Okay.
And you should probably get a couple of options. You'll just have to maybe be more specific.
It doesn't need to have of.
No, So here
Okay.
it is right here.
Okay, connecting the legends.
If I
All
click on
right.
it. Yeah. And then if I click on it, I can come into the site and then I can go to my videos. I can
Mhm.
choose the videos, video, or if I go to playlists, playlists are where I kind of organize them. So education and training.
Okay.
Then you should see a bunch of them down below, creating the buyer transaction and app files. Okay, so oops, progress announcement.
All right.
All right.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Here's the listing agreement, FF and GG, that one right there. If you want to go to that one.
Cool. Thanks.
Yeah. Anything else you guys want to throw out or throw up? Either way. All right. Things are still changing, so let's do this in a minute and send both of those to you.
Thank you.
This, please remember this here, where we say if you've got Form FF, you do need the compensation agreement. This has even changed to say that you need the compensation agreement unless the buyer is committed to paying their own compensation.
Mark,
We
are
should
you
probably
seeing
put
buyers
a-
paying their own compensation?
Buyers are paying usually the differential. Sellers are still willing to pay, but maybe not to the level that the buyer would like. So we're
What do you-
seeing agents.
What are you seeing
Go
buyers
ahead.
pay? What are you seeing the sellers pay?
And we're seeing sellers pay anywhere from 1.5% to 3%.
Oh,
Right.
okay. That's not an average.
I haven't. No, I wouldn't say. If I would average them, I would say we're probably at about 2.25%.
Okay.
Oh, really?
2.25 to
Wow.
2.5.
Okay, that's good.
Well, Mama suggested on this listing that I put 3% for the legends and 2% for the buyer. And
I'm sorry, who said that?
Mama, Audrey,
Yeah,
and
okay.
she said people that 2% is looking like people are accepting that. And you're okay with that? I mean, you think people are going to be okay with that?
Well, this is where we're going to differ a little bit is, we have our policies on buyer broker compensation and, under $1 million, it's 3% down to 2.5 will participate. Over $1 million is 2.5 down to 2 that will participate. So if it's off of that, you know that you may be paying something the company dollar.
Yeah,
We're talking about a list. We're talking about a listing. And
correct.
remember, whatever the seller says at the time of listing is only what their intention is at the time of listing.
Yeah,
So if your seller
right.
says, I would be willing to assist the buyer up to 2%,
Mm-hmm.
then that's fine. Then when someone makes if they call, then you would say, well, the seller has indicated that at this time, depending on the offer, they may be willing to consider up to 2% towards a buyer broker.
Mhm.
If the buyer still wants to ask for 3%, they have every right to do that. And the seller has every right to counter that to 2%. Or the seller could say, well, it's a fairly strong offer. It's a short timeline to close. I'll do 2.5, but not 3.
Okay.
So whatever you put into paragraph 10B is really just what they would consider at the time you actually take
Okay.
the listing.
It's not in
It's-
stone.
There's
I got,
nothing,
all right, got it.
there's nothing about it that's in stone.
All right,
If I mean, if you choose to, if you negotiate to 3% with a seller for the listing side, great.
right.
I think that's very positive. If the
Well,
seller
that's
says, well, I'm not paying,
all right.
I'm sorry.
No, I was gonna work on that. Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'm good.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if everybody's okay, if anybody has side conversations that they want to have, all you have to do is give me a ring. And I guess I'll talk to you a little later, and I hope that you have a wonderful week.
Hope you
Thanks,
do
Thank you,
too.
Clark.
Thank you, Clark. This has been
Thank you.
good for
Stop
me.
there.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good day,
Appreciate
everybody.
it.
Thank you, dear.
Wait, there's a comment I missed. I'm sorry. Oh, Diane. Okay, thank you. All right. I just want to make sure we cover everything. All right. So I'll let y'all go and have a great day. Thank you for taking your time. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye now.
Bye, everyone.